an interesting omen here, potentially for Kilmacud Crokes. Definitely a good omen. The last time Derry Dublin side was, against each other in the All-Ireland Club final, the Derry side was Balahi and the Dublin side was Kilmacud Crokes. That was in 1995, and Kilmacud Crokes got the victory on that day. And speaking of Kilmacud, we'll start, with their game, going a bit deeper into their game. Of course, they won 114 to 14 points against Kerins or rahillys. The crucial score, Hugh Kenny's goal in the 34th minute. That, to tag on to what you were saying about Shane Walsh and to tag on to the point they made about the defence, this shows that even when Shane Walsh kicks just a point, Hugh Kenny steps up and hits 1-2. Shane Cunningham was very impressive. Darren Mullen was very impressive. That's the strength. They have more than one main threat, I think, Crokes.
Yeah. And this, I know Crokes has come up a lot in recent months, and the numbers and the playing membership that they have, and people have talked about like the strength that they have they're a Dublin giant club. And I suppose one side of that is you can say, well, the smaller clubs have a more concentrated membership, so it's easier almost to get the best out of them. Whereas if you have like 1,000 members across all your grades, like you're not accounting for the guys who they're thrown into a club at 5 or 6 from their parents who love the GAA, and then they get to maybe 11 or 12 and they're old enough to say, actually, I don't really like GAA. And they you do lose players along the way. It's not 1,000 players at senior level. Keeping those lads up to the senior grade, that's where good coaching and people in the right places, that's what makes a good club. So that's a big plus from Kilmacud, that they have such good organisation within the infrastructure, the overall infrastructure of the club. And that filters down into the players, like you said there, and how they've recovered from, losing a guy like Cian O'Sullivan and still maintaining that standard. Losing a player like Paul Mannion, Shane Walsh is there to sift in. Now, I think there is a possibility that Paul Mannion could be back in time for the All-Ireland final, and like what a trump card you could pull from your pack if that was to come through. And on the goal, like we mentioned there about Shane Walsh only scoring 2 points from play, like another couple of centimetres and that's another point, and it was a serious kick. And for Hugh Kenny to be right underneath it and to be reacting well to it, and he was under a bit of pressure because the way the ball fell, it looked like Kerins or rahillys were going to keep him out, and he managed to angle the ball through and get the goal. And again, because the game was a little bit cagey, that was a crucial score. And you can understand, for teams like Kerins or rahillys, for teams like Glen, McCullen, like Croke Park is such a different venue. I mean, it's different to any other game they'll have played in their championship up to now. I think players have said before, it's kind of a wider pitch. You also have the noise. You have just the grandeur of the stadium. If you haven't played there before, an occasion can really get to you. So you can imagine teams were probably a little bit tentative getting into the game. Maybe not so much Kilmacud Crokes because they have so much experience.
Entire games there.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like they have county players that have played there. Like they know that stadium, but it can catch you. There's only so much mental preparation you can do for a game, and there's only so many times you can say, "Oh, this is just another game." Croke Park is not just another stadium; it's the stadium, it's the venue, and if you get there, it can spook you. But the way that the Kilmacud Crokes have maintained their standards, and club football or club GAA in general is quite cyclical. Like we've seen teams down through the years that win like 3-4 All-Irelands in a row, and then a couple of years later they're down to junior. And again, that can be kind of maybe more parish-based clubs, or the kind of the rural ones. And when they get into that vein of form, they know that this crop that we have to make the most of them, because we don't know what's coming up. And there's other outside factors as well: immigration, migration, losing players to having to move up to the city, and all those kind of problems that the Dublin clubs probably don't have to worry about as much. And then you lose players and you're not able to replace, and the production line gets a little bit interrupted. So that's obviously a plus if you're living in Dublin and you're in the city. And then sometimes they take players who move up from the country, like in Shane Walsh's case. And I know he's the high profile case, and I know there was a lot of pushback to his move, but you can see his point. Like, he lives in Dublin. The commute to Galway, I've driven that road myself. It's it's, you're talking at least 2 hours in the car. And when you're a footballer, you're an athlete, and injury prevention is so important, you're sitting in a car for 2 hours up and down on the motorway. That puts strain on your muscles. And a lot of players have had to change like job or careers, or they've had to move, to try and, make the most out of their football career or their sporting career. And Shane's just another example of that. I suppose it's just that if it wasn't Kilmacud Crokes, if it was Olaf's, or if it was, a lower ranked team, I don't think there would have been as much attention. It's, it does seem a bit like, big team comes down the country and plucks a player from one local, and I don't think that's the case. I mean, Shane Walsh seems to be a big club man. He seems to be a real volunteer, within the GAA. Like, he does a lot of coaching, and seems to be he's more than just a player that turns up and lines out for a team. He does seem to be a really genuine lad. So it does, from what I've seen anyway, it seems like this was just something he had to do, and it just happens to be Kilmacud Crokes that is benefiting from having him around.
But that's what I mean. It's the best club in Dublin getting the best, probably second to David Clifford as the best footballer in the country right now. I mean, like, he put in a performance for the ages in the All-Ireland final, and then next thing we hear about him, he's moving to probably the biggest club in the country in terms of resources, in terms of players. Like, I mean, to play with Paul Mannion in the forward line, like, it sounded ridiculous when you were hearing about it. But this has been a problem in Dublin ever since I can remember. This is not a fresh thing. Shane Walsh is not the first player to move to a big club in Dublin. St. Vincent's very successful in the 2010s, but if you look at their team, they had Brendan Egan, the Sligo centre half-back. He was playing in their half-back line. They had Nathan Mullins there, and they had Enda Varley, who was Mayo, very, very good Mayo forward, playing in their forward line with Mossy Quinn. They had Lorcan Smith from Westmeath. They had Joe Feeney from Armagh. They had a lot of these guys from different counties. If you go back to the start of the 2010s, Kilmacud Crokes won a Dublin title with Brian Kavanagh playing at full forward. Like, again, even Oliver Plunkett's, they had Anthony Moyles, they had Paul Galvin at one stage, Kieran McKeever, Armagh's centre half-back. This is not a new thing. Parnell's, how many players did they get? Colin Begley, Conor Mortimer, off the top of my head. So Shane Walsh got this attention because he is so brilliant. He's like literally one of the best Gaelic footballers in the country right now, no doubt about it. And he put in one of the best All-Ireland final performances I've ever seen. Never mind from a player who was on the losing team. So that's why it was such a big deal. And there is no doubt that he made the difference in that final against Nafina. When Nafina looked like they might have Crokes on the ropes, Shane Walsh kicked crucial points at crucial stages and got them through. So I can understand why people might be a little bothered about it, especially if you are an Nafina member. But there was one stage where Crokes did look rattled. And this was, in the second half. I predicted before this game that I thought it was going to be a classic Kilmacud Crokes victory. I thought they were going to win it in exactly the same way that they beat Naas, exactly the same way that they beat Portarlington, and the way that they beat the Downs. I thought that they were going to smash them early, hit 1-5 or something, get 5 or 6 points ahead, and cruise the rest of the game out. That's how they've done it. Their defense doesn't let you score. They get 5 or 6 points ahead, and then that's it. For example, Portarlington held scoreless from play in the first half. The Downs held scoreless from play in the first half. Like, remarkable defensive record there the Crokes have. And coming into the last quarter, they were 1-11-7 ahead. The game had gone pretty much exactly how I thought it would go. And then Crokes just started making kind of mistakes. Conor Ferris was going long with his kickouts. David Moran was fielding a lot of them. And the crowd were really getting in on the action now. And Kerins kind of looked like they might have Crokes a little bit rattled. Yeah.
And maybe that's the scare that they might have needed going into the final, because that's how they fumbled it last year against Kilcoo. And these, I suppose, look, these things can happen. As I said, when Tommy Walsh was on the call last week, he really did speak like, we're not going up there to walk behind the band. We are going up there to give this team a good rattle. And that's what they ended up doing in the end. And you mentioned there about David Moran's fielding, and I think it was his catch that set up that last attack for the attempt at trying to get a goal for a late equaliser. And And that can happen in games, you know, you think the game is closed out and you're so close to the line, and then, you know, a bit of momentum goes the other way, and you're just trying to grit your teeth and hold on to the end. And of course, look, they had gotten the goal that ended up being the crucial score. In a game like that, a goal was always probably going to be the prevailing factor. But I think, you know, they probably got what they needed to go in. If they had cruised through to the end, maybe then they might be not as sharp going into the final against Glen, and they will need to be against Glen because they are on such a high at the moment. They have all the momentum behind them. And it's, you know, going into a final when you're either the underdog or the favourite side, they're both difficult positions to be in. If you're the underdog, you have a big fight on your hands. Like, yes, you know, you've nothing to lose and nobody expects anything of you, so the pressure is off in some ways. But if you go up there and you prove everybody right, then that feels like you may as well have not turned up. But it's not easy to go in as the favourites either, because all of the pressure is immediately on you and everybody expects nothing less than a win. Like what you were saying there, you thought that they were going to ramp home. And when I think I put up my piece with Tommy Walsh on our website, and I think we had like one comment and it was like something like not a hope, you know. So there was no, apart from people from their own club going up there and hoping that they would get a result. Maybe not too many other people were expecting it, but you know, it's Kerry as well.
Yeah,
Kerry footballers.
With Kerins, they'd been beaten 3 times in Kerry though, and they'd scraped past Newcastle West and Éire O'Guinness. And if they were in the semi-final against Crokes, I think people would have been saying not a hope for them as well. So I think the how Kerins got there, I think, was kind of unconvincing, even though they did win the Munster Club Championship.
Yeah, but Kerry, that's something that Kerry have done before. Even their county team, you know, Kerry are never really beaten, and they have, you know, like that's just they're very like Kilkenny in that way. They're never beaten until they're on the bus going home. That's what's bred into them from very early on. And when they come up to Croke Park, it feels like a second home to them, and that goes back generations, back to the 70s. You know, like, you know, this isn't our home county, but when we come up here, it's like this is another patch of Kerry ground because they know how to win games there, and that's part of the Kerry mentality, I think. And they did. I mean, you know, they had Kilmacud up against the ropes when no one thought that they would at any point in that game. Again, look, they were probably chasing it a small bit during the game. And Kilmacud were probably always going to win. And they didn't, like, they got one more chance at it, but they didn't even get a shot on. So Kilmacud did, when the need was greatest, they did hold on.
Yeah, and no, but definitely when that free was floated in by Jack Savage in the 65th minute, definitely the goal that Kilmacud got last year would have flashed in their memory real quick.